Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're diving into The Wolf of Wall Street, Rise, Ruin, and Resurrection. We're going to unpack the wild, uncomfortable truth behind Jordan Belfort and the highly orchestrated machine he built entirely on illusion. Let's get right into it. So, the absolute crux of what we're exploring today is this massive, glaring irony. How in the world does a guy who systematically destroyed the lives and life savings of thousands of people manage to turn his financial crimes into, well, a badge of honor? I mean, he lied, he scammed everyday Americans, served a shockingly brief 22 months in a minimum security prison, and then somehow popped out the other side as a wealthy pop culture icon. To figure out why audiences are literally still cheering for him today, we've got to rewind to the very beginning. You see, he wasn't born some Wall Street titan with old money connections. No, Belfort was a relentless, scrappy hustler right from the jump. By the time he was 16, he made 20 grand in a single summer just selling Italian ice. Crazy, right? Then he enrolls in dental school and famously walks out on the literal first day, the absolute second the dean tells the class it isn't a profession for getting rich. He even built a door-to-door meat and seafood business that was pulling in 100 grand a month before it spectacularly crashed into bankruptcy. But sitting in that wreckage, he realized his true superpower. He didn't need a great product because he could sell absolutely anything. And that realization is exactly what brought him to Wall Street in the late 1980s, right before Black Monday wiped out the market and his entry-level job at Ella Rothschild. But honestly, getting fired was the best thing that could have possibly happened to him. Why? Because he discovered his golden goose, the penny stock. Now, you know these are unregulated, highly illiquid shares of obscure, often completely worthless companies. Serious brokers wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot pole. But Belfort, he absolutely loved them because they completely bypassed normal Wall Street rules. And the kicker, they offered an astronomical 50% broker commission. His legendary cold calling technique had absolutely nothing to do with financial fundamentals or corporate earnings. It was pure psychology. Picture Belfort calling up a small business owner in Nebraska, pitching this tiny, unheard-of tech company. He wasn't actually selling a stock. He was selling manufactured urgency, pure, unadulterated FOMO, the fear of missing out. He'd just bulldoze right through any hesitation, drown out their doubt, and basically tell the prospect, hey, you're getting in on a ground floor opportunity that Wall Street hasn't even sniffed out yet. He'd literally say, you don't have to understand the company, sir. You just have to understand the upside. I'm locking you in for 4,000 shares. Let's jump to 1989 and see how this hustle builds into a literal empire. Belfort teams up with Danny Porish, a fast-talking hustler from Long Island, to create their own firm. And just listen to the name out loud, Stratton Oakmont. It sounds like a prestigious 100-year-old firm steeped in tradition, right? Leather-bound books, mahogany desks. But that was the illusion. The reality? It was a strip mall boiler room, and it wasn't staffed by seasoned financial analysts. We're talking bartenders, college dropouts, and neighborhood guys. Belfort didn't want experience. He wanted hungry closers who'd follow his high-pressure system without asking a single question. And the underlying mechanics of this whole fraud were shockingly simple. We're talking about a textbook pump-and-dump scheme. Step 1, Stratton secretly buys up massive blocks of cheap, obscure shares. Step 2, the brokers use Belfort's famous straight-line persuasion technique to relentlessly cold-call investors. This manufactures all this fake excitement and artificially pumps up the stock price. And then, step 3, once the price hits its absolute peak, Belfort and his insiders dump all their shares for a massive profit. The stock price immediately collapses, and the investors? They're left holding completely worthless paper. Now, while these executives are living this billionaire lifestyle, it is absolutely crucial to remember who was actually funding it. Their targets weren't wealthy institutional elites. They weren't hedge fund managers who could afford to take a hit. No, they targeted vulnerable, everyday people. Working-class retirees, desperate parents, people who felt totally ignored by traditional Wall Street. Stratton sold them false hope, wrapped in urgency, and completely drained their life savings based on entirely fake financial projections. So you might be wondering, why were the brokers so fiercely aggressive in pushing these terrible stocks onto innocent people? Well, it all comes back to one number, 50%. Over on traditional Wall Street, a broker might make a 1 or 2% commission selling a safe, established blue-chip stock, like IBM or Coca-Cola. But at Stratton, a single phone call pitching penny stocks could yield thousands of dollars, going directly into a young 20-something's pocket. And that sheer volume of fast, unregulated cash fueled a chaotic office culture unlike anything the financial world had ever seen. Which brings us to the infamous culture of Stratton Oakmont. It was essentially a feral, high-octane fraternity. It's wild to think about, but Belfort basically became a cult leader in Armani. He built this system where loyalty and fear were the main currencies. Top closers, treated like absolute kings. They were showered with $2,000 suits and Rolexes tossed across the sales floor like candy. But underperformers were publicly humiliated and instantly fired on the spot. And to keep this incredibly high-pressure machine running, the drug use was just rampant. Quaaludes to slow down, cocaine to speed up. The office was this insane blur of air horns, destroyed properties, strippers in the conference room, and champagne being poured directly into fax machines. But while the party is raging inside the office, let's unpack the anatomy of what was happening outside. By 1994, the firm is moving millions. They're taking companies public, but the SEC is finally flagging their suspicious filings. And for the investors, the devastating reality usually looked a little something like this. An investor gets convinced to buy in at, say, $7 a share. The hype machine pumps it to a peak of $30. The investor's thrilled, right? They think you're getting rich. Then Stratton dumps their shares. In a matter of hours, that stock plummets to just 30 cents. The money didn't just evaporate, it transferred straight from the victims' bank accounts directly into Jordan Belfort's pockets. As the firm exploded in size, journalists from Forbes started asking some really uncomfortable questions. So, the sheer complexity of hiding all of this illicit wealth became desperate. Belfort liked to call it his asset protection plan. The authorities, on the other hand, rightly called it money laundering. He set up offshore shell companies parked over in Geneva. He opened illicit accounts under his British aunt's name just to exploit banking loopholes. At one point, it got so unbelievably reckless that he was using his housekeeper to smuggle envelopes stuffed with cash into Switzerland by literally sewing them into her bra. And the recklessness of his financial crimes rapidly bled right into his personal life. He genuinely believed he was entirely untouchable. In June of 1996, while high on drugs, Belfort straight up ignored the desperate warnings of his yacht's captain. He forced him to sail his luxury vessel, the Naomi, right into a massive Mediterranean storm off the coast of Italy. The yacht begins taking on water and sinks. Belfort and his family had to be rescued by the Italian Navy, sending a multi-million-dollar vessel and $2 million in jewelry straight to the bottom of the sea. Meanwhile, back in New York, the walls were closing in, and fast. FBI agent Gregory Coleman had been methodically piecing this giant puzzle together for years. In the mid-90s, he's tracking these strange patterns of $50,000 cashier's checks moving through casinos. He quietly flips disgruntled brokers who'd been burned by Belfort, actually getting them to wear wires right on the sales floor. All of this culminates in a massive FBI dawn raid on Stratton, Oakmont in October of 1996. But the final nail in the coffin? That happened in early 1997. Even though he knew he was under investigation, Belfort arrogantly wired a fatal $2 million to Switzerland, a move that was caught right on tape, ending the chase forever. Suddenly, the wolf is backed into a corner. Facing up to 30 years in federal prison for wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering, the man who built an empire demanding absolute, unquestioning loyalty did what he always did. He sold. He wore a wire for the federal government. More than 30 of his own loyal employees, partners, and friends, people who had joined him straight out of high school and followed his playbook to the absolute letter, were indicted. Because Belfort flipped on them. He handed them right over to the feds just to save himself. Now, you really have to look at the disparity in the legal fallout here because it is absolutely staggering. When the dust finally settled, the followers, the brokers who learned how to lie directly from Jordan himself, were sent off to serve lengthy, hard sentences in federal prison facilities. And the mastermind, the leader of the entire massive fraud, because of his cooperation, Jordan Belfort served a mere 22 months in a minimum security camp. We are talking about a facility with literally no fences, where the guards didn't carry guns, and where he spent his afternoons lifting weights and playing tennis. And honestly, it was in that very prison camp that the seed for his resurrection was planted. Belfort actually found himself sharing space with comedian Tommy Chong. As Belfort is recounting all these wild tales of the drugs, the sunken yachts, and the millions in smuggled cash, Chong wasn't outraged at all. He was entertained. He told Belfort, "Write it down." And so, Belfort wrote his memoir. A book absolutely packed with punchlines, wild parties, and cinematic flair. But ironically, it was almost completely devoid of any real remorse or apologies to the actual people he destroyed. Because we cannot forget about the victims. Belfort owes a staggering $110 million in court-ordered restitution to the people whose retirements, homes, and life savings he stole. And to this day, only a microscopic fraction of that money has ever been paid back. The rest just vanished into complex offshore accounts, real estate trusts, and legal loopholes. He claims he's still working on paying it back, but decades later, the victims were still sitting there, waiting for justice. Which brings us back to the stark, uncomfortable reality of today. On one side, you've got Belfort's reality. He sold the film rights to his book, watched Leonardo DiCaprio play him in a Martin Scorsese Hollywood blockbuster, and now he tours the world as a highly paid motivational speaker and podcaster. He literally teaches the exact same sales tactics he used to commit fraud. And on the other side, the victim's reality. Permanent financial ruin, unresolved debt, and lost retirements. He successfully took his massive crimes and flipped them into a wildly lucrative pop culture brand. Belfort once justified his actions by saying he was guilty of being greedy, but then added that so was everybody else. And honestly, maybe that gets to the heart of why he got away with it and why he still fills auditoriums today. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to ponder. Did Jordan Belfort simply escape the justice system, or did society actively applaud his escape? Are we genuinely outraged by the Wolf of Wall Street, or do we secretly deep down just want to be him? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.